It is the Cyberpunk mod I built. Why not? Because we can. Because Cyberpunk looks really cool, we can't wait to play it, it's got an awesome theme, and it just fits. It is not currently, there isn't a huge plan. No. Sorry to disappoint you. No, we've spoke about it, like I said, there's ideas floating around, but we're not sure if that will happen yet. But just keep an eye on us and our socials, and maybe eventually you'll get really, really lucky. Nope. We're not approved / partnered with CD Projekt Red, so we can't make any kind of profit from their, logos and things. This is purely this is basically fan art. I don't know. It was going to go to events, we're going to make more videos, do more content, cool stuff. I'm going to play Cyberpunk on it, of course. But the whole plan was for it to go to loads of events, and Corsair wanted to take it about and do things with it, but then all events just stopped. So, we don't know yet, we'll see. It can run Crysis a lot. I found a blender big enough. Oh damn.
That actually looks pretty
Now I look even more ominous.
Yeah.
Welcome.
You're definitely an evil wizard.
All the coolant, the Fierce logo that you can kind of make out down there is airbrushed on with UV paint. And there's a couple of other elements, like the one ram stick that I painted there. That's got UV paint on it as well, so some elements of it will glow under the black light. Pretty heavy. We haven't weighed it. We actually had a couple of bets, amongst a few people here, on how much it would weigh. And I know for a fact that the case alone with the glass panels is almost 30 kilo, empty. So it's a beast. I'll probably say you're approaching 50 kilos on it. Just because you've got these two huge radiators at the front and the one at the top that are all just filled with coolant. Is it true that it's so energy efficient you can run off 3 King Edward potatoes in series?
I was wondering how long it was going to take you to get I mean, if you're going to run them in series, it's definitely the most energy efficient way.
With the amount of lighting packed into this, and the pumps, and the tiny little 7-inch touchscreen that's in the side there, I wouldn't call this power efficient. I'd call it high performance. The PSU powering it is a HX1000i Corsair power supply, 1000 watts. I was going to say it doesn't need it all, but it's probably using most of it. But I can run through some things. I reckon the total price of the build would be around £9,000 to £10,000 for just the parts.
Just parts? Wow.
Just the parts. You got to think these are two 2080 Ti's, so they are also Asus ROG Strix 2080 Ti's. So they were about 1,500 quid a piece. So you got $3,000 there.
Yeah. And then the processor, is that the 3950?
Yeah, the processor's the 3950X, and when I put it
650, 700, I think.
Yeah, when I put it in there, it hadn't even been out that long, so it was still 750, I think.
Yeah. Oh, right, yeah.
The motherboard again is probably about the same price as that. It's about over 700. It's the Asus Crosshair Formula 8 motherboard. The 3000 series came out not too long after I started. Okay? And like I say, there's no water blocks for the 3000 series right now, especially not Corsair ones. So they'd have just been stuck there and they wouldn't have been water cooled and it wouldn't have looked this pretty. It's kind of the point, to a degree. I wanted to make something that was more something like a street kid in the game might actually own. if that makes sense. There was a lot of mods out there, and they were all like really clean and really pristine. And I felt like they all had too much cyber and not enough punk. So that's kind of where I went with this one. I don't know if you can see from that camera, but there are like studded spikes all over the top. Initially, I was going to drill holes into the top of the case, but all of this case is like solid. I don't even know if it is steel or aluminium. I imagine some bits of both, but the top of this is really strong. And I drilled like 2 holes, then realised it was going to take me about a month to put in like 70 studs if I did it that way. So I instead cut and sprayed acrylic, studded that, screwed all the studs into those studded acrylic bits, and then they are adhered to the top.
Ah.
Don't want to think about it.
Well, it's only really the 2080s
Yeah, to be fair,
that have gone down, and
the only major change is the graphics cards.
potentially, if there is a very similar water card that comes out for a 3080.
Yeah, I could potentially change it to 23080s, I guess. Once Corsair make the blocks.
Yeah.
I'm just calling to say
So the blue loop that you see there, that is the loop that's just for the CPU. Oh, it's not just the CPU, it's actually also cooling the motherboard. This blue tube here goes to the CPU block, and then the tube next to it, which you can't quite make out, just this one here, that one goes up into the VRM of the motherboard, and then from there it goes up into the radiator that's on the top. So you've got CPU and the motherboard VRMs, and then you've got the pink loop which cools the two 2080 Ti's. But the thing with this case is you can actually build 2 computers into this.
Oh yeah, I've seen those.
You've got the main board at the back, which is the full ATX. You can go E-ATX, it's huge, there's loads of space. But then on top of the shroud here, you actually have the points to add the standoffs and mount a micro ATX motherboard on top of where your PSU is. And I've removed it, but that then would go onto the back, and there'd be a switch on the back to turn your bottom computer on, and the switch on the front to turn your main PC on. So obviously there was companies involved that helped like sort the parts and everything like that, but the actual design of all of it was entirely me. Like there was no. I'd ask for feedback now and then, like if it was things like, right, I'm going to do this, and what do you guys think? Do you think that's too much or not enough, or things like that? But like all the concepts and all the ideas for it and where I was putting things was all me. It does. The sign at the top is essentially an acrylic sheet that was laser cut to have the signage from the hotel in the game, the No-Tell Motel. That was laser cut out. I then used a heat gun and bent it, put it into place, and I 3D printed all of the letters that you can see. So all of they were printed in transparent resin. Then they are backlit by the Lighting Node Pro, like Corsair RGB strips, so I can make it look like parts of the sign are actually flickering on and off. I'm quite pleased with that bit, it's pretty cool. Let's see how much I can reel off from my head, because like I say, I don't have it written down in front of me. So, we've got a AMD 3950X processor on an Asus Crosshair Formula 8 motherboard, with 2 Asus ROG Strix 2080 Ti's, HX1000i power supply. The RAM is Corsair Dominator Platinum. That's a 64 gigabyte kit. Like I say, that's crazy high-end RAM. That's at 3600 megahertz as well. All of the cooling, no storage. There's a Seagate FireCuda M.2 520, 1 terabyte in there, I think. But also it has 14 terabytes of storage on a Seagate Ironwolf Pro hard drive tucked away in the back somewhere. The cooling, like I say, we've got 2 480mm radiators on the front of the build, which are the graphics card loop. So they're going through into these 2 XG7 Corsair GPU water blocks, pumping from a Corsair XD5, I think they are. And that's the same for the CPU. The CPU is pumping from an XD5, all using Corsair fittings, Corsair acrylic tubing, into the XC5. A lot of their naming conventions are XC this or XG that. So that's the XC5. No, it's XC7 CPU block, which then goes onto the VRMs up into a 420mm radiator back down into the reservoir. That's a lot of stuff. We wouldn't be able to. It's not ours, if that makes sense. Like, it's technically like Cyberpunk branding, so I don't think we could use that exact like samurai image in anything we did and sell it for profit. I don't think there's. Ask a lawyer. 13.
Oh.
There are 8 LL120s on the front of the case, 2 LL140s on the rear, and an additional 3 LL120s, or are they? No, there'll be 3 140s on the top. 3 140s on the top, 2 on the back, and 8 120s on the front of the case. Not formally. Like, I initially did, but it was more stress testing just to make sure everything was functioning right, and I've like overclocked it and things, but I don't have any scores to hand. But I guess we could make a video on that. All of the intake is from the front, so you've got 8 fans, 8 120s coming from the front, and then you've got 5 exhausters, so you've got 3 on the top and 2 out the back. But they're 20mm bigger, so I guess it's really fairly even, I'd imagine. I don't know how the scale of the fan will really impact it, but overall 8 fans on the front, 8 fans intake, 5 fans out. But the outtake are bigger fans. Do with that what you will. Incredible question. If you put wheels on it, would the force of the fans start driving your way? With the weight of it, that's very unlikely. There's not enough thrust. No, it's coming.
We were just talking about that.
We were literally just saying that's what we're going to do with the benchmarks. But you might not see gameplay footage until they release the game. And with the delays going on, you might never see it. With great difficulty in some of it, I actually had to mod this part here basically houses your hard drives. And how the case comes, you can't mount 2 reservoirs like that on there. Initially I was going to mount one on top of the radiator, but I didn't like how it looked. They were kind of like stepped. You had one at the top and then one down. And I thought they'd just look a lot better parallel next to each other. So I had to modify a bracket and drill a few holes, basically, to bolt down these 2 reservoirs on top of the hard drive cage that you see there. There is a 7-inch touchscreen just behind them as well. And initially I was going to mount that on like an arm so you could like kind of rotate it around, but the mounting for that, in the end there was just no room for it because the arm didn't bend back as far as it needed to be able to like fit everything else in. So in the end that just got flat mounted onto the back. In terms of the rest of the loop, it's the 1000D case, it's huge. I don't have the actual dimensions, but I think it's almost 800mm high on the exterior. So you've got like a good 700mm space inside to just do with what you will. Like there is a lot of room. So this is the Nomad. This is one of the inspired builds. Plug that in for you.
And which cool master case is this?
H500 Cooler Master case.
And that's quite a decent sized case.
Yeah, this case is pretty big. Yeah, so essentially when I first got the case, I was like, I can do anything in here. I don't have to worry about a thing. This is limitless. I can just keep putting things in here with no problem. But like I say, there was a couple of things like the monitor arm. I was concerned the hotel sign was going to fit at one point. There was a point I got to where it was like, I planned too much. But I got it all in there at the end. Kind of got some plans together before Christmas, you're right. And then it kind of started happening just before March, and then nothing happened with it for a really long time. Like a good 4 months, nothing happened. We had like ideas, things planned, parts had started arriving, and then it just got put on hold for like a good 4 or 5 months. Now, it took longer than I wanted it to take to build it. A lot of that was down to COVID, and when that kind of really hit, this didn't get as much of my attention as I'd have liked to have, given to it.
And Christmas as well.
And Christmas, yeah. I was doing other things, like we got really busy over Christmas, and then we had like a very brief quiet period where I really got stuck into the designs and my thoughts on what I was going to do. And then just as I was about to start was when like kind of COVID started rolling in. So I was doing a lot of other things, working here, there and everywhere within the business as best I could to help. And eventually I got back to it and dedicated all my time to it, and here we are. But I think it was, in total, it was over 300 hours worth of work if you consider the designing, the 3D printing hours, the laser cutting, all the CAD work that I did for things like the laser cutting and the 3D prints, making everything fit, the paint time, like just, sanding everything down so that the paint would adhere to everything, sanding it, priming it, painting it, doing then their vinyl cuts that are then used as stencils to do their airbrushing, and then waiting for all that to dry and then seal that. There's a lot of time in it. The quickest part of this was probably the loop. Like, once I'd got all the customized elements together and it's like, right, this is what's happening, I just need to bend the pipes now, that was probably one of the quicker parts. That's a question. Because I've said a number of times now, like, I'm one of those people, I'm a creative person, and that means every time I work on something, by the end of what I've finished doing, I hate it. It's one of those things, like, I don't know if any of you have ever heard the saying that of the creator's curse, where like, you'll make something, but whilst you're making that thing, you've learned new techniques and processes whilst making it. So once it's done, you know you can do better. And therefore you end up not liking elements, or you think, oh no, I could have done that better, or I should have done this that way, and so on. But the nature of like deadlines and stuff like that, you never get to change those things. I would have liked to have potentially added swanky braided cables to it, but I'm not mad with what I've done with like these thick covers I've done for the cables. If you guys can see them, they're more like thick black tubing that looks more industrial. I think it fits the theme better anyway. I would have liked to have had some more graphics to the reservoirs in there, maybe like some of the drinks branding, because I don't know if you can see that from there either. Just in front of the reservoirs, there's branding for one of the drinks brands in the game, Nicola, Drink Crazy. But other than that, like, I'm fairly happy with most of it. It's just, yeah, I guess if I really sat here and looked at it, I could probably tear it apart, so I'm trying not to. What's the best looking feature? I would imagine that's a matter of opinion. Some people might like some parts, some people might not like those parts.
Okay, I'm going to ask again, what's the best looking feature in your build?
Oh, I know what you're getting at. That's not even something that someone's asked, is it? You've just seen something and gone, oh, I can make a pun.
Oh, that's exactly what I did.
That's exactly what you did. Okay, so for some insight and context into what Chris just said, what's the best looking feature? I'm going to get up to show you this. What's the best looking feature?
I'm so proud of myself.
There is. Can you even see it?
Yeah.
You might even be able to see it on the video.
You can, yeah.
Look at this, guys. kind of stuck down, isn't it? Oh.
Pop your eyeball out.
What's the best looking feature, guys? Their eyeball. This was kind of an afterthought, I'm not going to lie. No, it wasn't an afterthought. It was something that I wanted to do initially, but it was more of a really desirable feature. I wanted to build a webcam into that eyeball and set it all up so that you could even have the little 7-inch touchscreen that you can see over there, have that displaying what was happening, what you could see through that eyeball. So it's not something I ever got round to making work, which is a little disappointing because it would have been really cool. So instead I just put like a little LED on it, which I don't think is turned on right now. But yeah, great pun. Yeah, best looking feature. Oh, it's an eye, yeah. The most difficult part of the build. This might sound like a really boring answer, but it would probably be elements of the cable management. There are obviously 2 graphics cards, both with dual 6-pin power cables. Then all of the lighting, there are almost two full Lighting Node Pro kits in this. So there's all of those Corsair adapters, which are going into, I think there's 3 or 4 LED controllers in the back of here, then connected up to another 2 or 3 lighting nodes, which are then connected to the Commander Pro, and all of the Hydra X has its own individual lighting connectors. So everything's like daisy chained together and routed round in the best way it can be. The lighting strips in the top behind the hotel sign, the lighting for the fans, there's lighting coming in the rear of the case that you can't quite see from there. And there's also, if you look at the shroud, you might notice that it looks like the blue light's like travelling down this kind of like faux power cable down here. So it looks like the power's kind of flowing from this down the cable and into the rest of the build. That was probably one of the more satisfying parts as well. Once I finally got all of that set up and had all the lighting moving how I wanted it to move, like with the flickering hotel sign and the power lights moving and all those elements. So what I did was I had strips of, I think there were 5mm, the 3 or 5mm acrylic strips that were cut down to about the right size that they would fit into the top of the case there underneath the radiator. I then made some graphics, converted them into the right files that could be used on a laser cutter, and then they were then laser cut out of that sheet of acrylic. I then used a heat gun to bend the end of the acrylic so the side is curved on the, you can't even really see it, on the far right side over there. It curves around like the hotel sign does in the game. It was one of the most prominent things I'd seen in screenshots, so I thought it has to be part of the build. It's a place that you're going to visit often in the game, as far as I'm aware, so it would look really cool to include it. The letters were all 3D printed in a transparent resin. So I got the sizes from the file I used for the laser cut, extruded them out, and then kind of gave them a bit of backing so they wouldn't fall through. 3D printed them, glued them all into the acrylic, and then backlit them with a Corsair Lighting Node Pro so I can make all the lights flicker and give it all the right colours for the right places. The motel sign's got to be one of the best features. Sure, like if you can get power and you got your games installed that don't need an online connection like a lot of games today do, I'm sure it'll treat you really well in an apocalypse situation. And if you can't get the power, it would also make a fantastic barricade. Like 100%. You put this behind a door, no one's coming in. You know, that's a really good idea.
What, without the Cyberpunk
Like, obviously without the Cyberpunk elements, because, as I keep coming back to it, we're not partnered with CD Projekt Red, we're not affiliated with CD Projekt Red, we can't make money out of things that CD Projekt Red made, like this logo and some of the other pieces of art that are on the case. But the general idea of moddable items, like you buy this case and then you get like a kit car setup, I like it. I'm going to give that some thought. Everything I could find. There's no other way to put it. When plans started, there was only the odd screenshot of some of the more like prominent locations in the game that you see in the trailers. There was an hour-long playthrough video, I think, like the first hour or an hour of gameplay or something that was live on a YouTube channel. And I just sat there and I must have watched it a good 10 times, just pausing at certain points, taking notes of the timestamps of things that I'd seen and taking screenshots of like the advertisements I could see and the names of the restaurants and the billboards and the little branding elements that I could see in there to try and kind of build a library of inspirational and there's a word I'm looking for. Reference. That's the word. I build like a library of reference that I could keep coming back to. I know this is a theme, this is what I'm going for, this looks cool, we can tie that in this way. So basically I just went through so much of their content, picked out all the best bits I can, and even some of the bits that were more subtle than the rest of it, so that only those that really know what they're looking at will, make sense of it. They've actually got a website called nightcity.love, which is kind of cool if you guys haven't been on it already. And it's literally like a website for Night City, the city in the game. And that's covered in little pop-up advertisements and other like banner ads and things like that for different products that are in the game. So when I turn this around, you'll get a closer look at it if you haven't seen it in some of the pictures already. I've basically made out like there's been like posters posted onto the back of the case from all of these different brands. So I've had to go in, get the files, manipulate them, then I had to print them all out, manipulate them so they look like they were worn and that they'd been there for a while, and then applied them all to the rear of the case to try and give that effect. That's where I got a lot of the inspiration from, was the playthrough videos, trailers, concept art, and their nightcity.love website.
I'm just calling to say I